It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by CartKing.com. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps the current business you have right now wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Well, CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail and coffee and food kiosks that money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor, outdoor carts and kiosks, heated, secure outdoor facilities, to small indoor coffee carts and coffee stations. CartKing.com designs and builds them all. So what you do is you go to their website, cart-king.com, check out the design. They help you design it. They'll custom build it for you, and they'll ship it worldwide. Give them a call at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. Get a good deal. Okay, I got a call today from Doug Caddy, author of the book Being There, Eyewitness History. We've had him on, I guess it's the third time. Fascinating man. He's been everywhere in history: Watergate, Koreagate, the Kennedy assassination, an insider's insider. Mr. Caddy, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm here in Houston, Texas.
The scene of the crime. The scene of the crime. They were the Dallas, Texas. So tell us about you. Remind the audience, who is Doug Caddy?
Well, I'm an attorney. I'm admitted to the District of Columbia Bar and the Texas Bar. And I've written this book, Being There, Eyewitness to History, which covers the last 70 years. Because no credit to me, I just appeared on these in these different events. They just happened, and I just happened to be there, for better or for worse. And so I recount these different events, some of which you just mentioned in your opening remarks there. And today we're going to talk about something very important and something very significant and something that's in the news today, and why it's so important to our country.
And that's the stuff about President Trump trying to release this information, declassify this information in the FISA warrant, which is the search warrant, and I guess the search warrant application. The wiretap and surveillance affidavits of Carter Page. Is that correct?
That's right. Today is September 20th, 2018, and on September 17th, earlier this week, President Trump asked the Justice Department and the FBI to declassify certain pages from the FISA, and that's a FISA application on Carter Page, which was President Trump's foreign policy advisor. Now, FISA stands for a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and there's a court underneath that called the FISA Court. And this is a court that is appointed by the president, and actually the actual appointments are made by the Chief Justice on a rotating basis. The justices serve for up to 7 years, and they hear in secret the applications from the NSA and from the FBI for surveillance of foreign intelligence operations that they think threaten the security of the United States. And the reason it's in the news today is that President Trump wants to declassify certain pages of those dealing with Carter Page, who has pleaded guilty in the Trump-Russia scandal.
Oh no! Wait a second. I don't believe that Carter Page has pled guilty. I don't believe he's been charged. Carter Page.
Okay. Okay. Are we thinking of Papadopoulos then?
Yeah, Papadopoulos. He has pled guilty, and he got a 2-week. I think it was a 2-week sentence for lying to the FBI. Yeah, but Carter Page was under investigation. He was mentioned in the Steele dossier as traveling to Russia, meeting with the head of Rosneft, and he admits to doing that. He admits that half of the stuff that in the Steele dossier, Carter Page does, but he has not been charged. But he is the one. You're right that he was that initiated the FISA warrant And previously, they've released a redacted FISA warrant application, which pretty much dispelled all this nonsense going out there by Hannity and stuff like that, saying that, they relied on lies in the Steele dossier. They didn't say that Clinton paid for the Steele dossier. It was full of lies. They lied to the judge. And they released the 20 pages. They released the first redacted version, but now Trump wants to release a fully unredacted version.
Yes, because apparently Trump's position is that it's based on the dossier compiled by that British intelligence agency, which he believes is full of inaccuracies. And as my understanding, he maintains that if that is true, that the FISA court should never have issued and authorized the application, approved the application that was made to it. And that's a thrust of his argument, and it may extend to other defendants in the Trump-Russian scandal. Now, in order to understand what's going on here, we really have to go back to the beginning, okay? And to go back to the beginning, at least as far as I know, and as explained in my book, we have to go back to 1969. In 1969, Carl Schroeder, who was a former military intelligence agent, actually an active intelligence agent from the military, who was assigned to the Washington, D.C. police, recruited Robert Merritt to be a confidential informant. Merritt was just a high school graduate. He'd been abused by priests in high school and in his catechism class in West Virginia for over 3 years on a daily basis. And as a result, he fled West Virginia and came to Washington, D.C. And he was profiled by the Washington, D.C. police and military intelligence for being susceptible, for being recruited as a confidential informant. And he proved to be an extraordinary, able confidential informant. He agreed to become a confidential informant, and this was 1969. In 1970, the Houston Plan was authorized by the White House, by President Nixon himself. It was a plan devised by Tom Charles Houston, who was among the founders of Young Americans Freedom. That's where I knew him back, which was founded in September of 1960. The first conservative youth organization, National Youth Organization, and by President Nixon. And it was really the police state on steroids. In other words, President Nixon was very dissatisfied with the NSA, the National Security Agency, with the FBI, with the CIA, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. He felt all four of these agencies were not doing the job they should be doing, and he wanted to create a super agency on steroids that was above those four agencies that would do the things that he wanted done. And he did create that. It was the Houston Plan, and the first and only employee of the Houston Plan, which took place right up through Watergate, and even for a year after Watergate, was Robert Merritt. And he undertook activities and actions upon the request of the FBI and of military intelligence and the Washington, D.C. police, that these other agencies would not do because they were illegal. They were illegal. These were break-ins. These were stealing of mail. These were wiretaps. These were the poisoning of anti-war protesters who were marching in Washington, and it included even the assassination of a lawyer and the planned assassination of a professor at American University that was aborted because of the Watergate break-in and the case that arose from that. And so we have to go back to the Houston Plan and its importance. And under the Houston Plan, there was created a FISA court. It wasn't called FISA in those days. In fact, there was really no name for it. It was a court that operated in secret in Washington, and Robert Merritt would go before the court and execute an affidavit as to his personal knowledge that had been written by the FBI and handed to him 15 minutes before the court convened. And because I'm going to speak so much today, I thought I would call upon you, Ed, to read from my second page of my preface, which discussed the information that was given to me by Robert Merritt about this secret court. Yeah. Could you do so, Ed?
Yeah, I'm going to read from the book Being There, Eyewitness to History, page 2 of the preface. But before I do that, I got a quick question for you, because you said that you were the creator of this group, Young Americans Freedom?
Yes,
And Robert Merritt was associated with that group?
No, he was not. He was, and even in high school during that period. No, he was not associated with the group. Tom Charles Houston was. Tom Charles Houston was, along with President Nixon, created the Houston Plan. And that's why I mentioned how I knew him. I knew Tom Charles Houston because he was among the founders of the Young Americans for Freedom in September 1960. But we're talking about in 1970 when the Houston Plan was created 10 years later.
Okay, and Houston was? He was like the handler of Merritt, or did he know Merritt?
No, he may have known Merritt, but actually he was in the White House and did different activities. At one point before Watergate broke, because I knew him, he invited me to visit him in the White House, and he escorted me through the White House and introduced me to Pat Buchanan, who was a Nixon speechwriter. So he was sort of a freelancer within the White House to do assignments. And among these, he worked with President Nixon in drafting the 37-page Houston Plan.
Gotcha. And so when did you first meet Robert Merritt?
I've never met Robert Merritt personally, but he contacted me in about 2008 to ask me to help him write his memoir, which was called Watergate Exposed. And I did assist him in doing that, and it was published by Trying Day in 2010.
So you and Merritt have been basically missing each other, but crossing paths in history, involved in the same type of projects, because you were involved with this guy, Houston, who wrote the plan, the Houston Plan that Merritt was employed under. But you never met, actually, is that why he contacted you to help him write the book?
Yes, well, I was never involved in the Houston Plan. I only knew Tom Charles Houston. Right. I just knew him from 1960, okay? I didn't even know the Houston Plan existed until it really became known as part of Watergate. And so that should be made quite clear. Robert Merritt talked about me as part of the Watergate scandal. And I'll get into that in a moment. As to, though we've never met, he drastically changed the course of my life upon the direction of Carl Schofter, who was that military intelligence agent,
right?
Was with the Washington, D.C. police. And by the way, according to Robert Merritt, both Carl Schofter and Bob Woodward went through the NSA's Bent Hill Farm station in Virginia, which is where you learn spycraft. Bob Woodward, immediately before he became a Washington Post reporter, worked out of the Pentagon. He was a high official working in the Pentagon. He was liaison to the White House and reported on a weekly basis there to General Alexander Haig. So Bob Woodward came out of military intelligence, and he went to the Washington Post. And at the same, Carl Schofter came out of military intelligence. He went to work for the Washington police.
And that's the information about Bob Woodward. That's been confirmed by Len Kolodny, right?
I do not know that to be true. I know Lincoln Nolly talks about his military background. I don't know whether he has ever talked about how they were both trained anonymously at the NSA's Bent Hill Farm Station there in Virginia. But Lincoln Nolly has talked many times and written about the military intelligence background of Bob Woodward, and Bob Woodward doesn't dispute this.
Right.
He in fact talks about in his book about Mark Felt that he was in the White House waiting to meet with Alexander Haig when he first met Mark Felt, who was there. Mark Felt being the deep throat in Watergate, the assistant director of the FBI. Mark Felt was there to see someone else in the White House, and they were both sitting in the same room, and they struck up a conversation. That's how he met him.
Okay, and just to confirm this, go back to this Houston again. You were acquainted with Houston, but you weren't aware of the Houston Plan until you were told about it by Robert Merritt.
Robert Merritt. I became familiar with the Houston Plan because it was reported as part of the Watergate scandal.
Okay.
And it later became became a subject of the Church Committee hearings in 1975. I almost regret here that I mentioned I knew Tom Charles Houston because that apparently has muddled the situation here. But I had no contact with the Houston Plan. I did not know of his existence until after Watergate broke. when it emerged as part of the scandal.
And I would encourage listeners to go back and listen to the previous interviews with Douglas Caddy, also the one with Robert Merritt that's in the member section, and also the shows with Len Kolodny, since all these names are up here, we're talking about them. But let's read from your book here, Being There, Eyewitness to History, from the second page of the preface. Get my glasses on here. One of the great mysteries of Watergate is the role played in it by the controversial Houston Plan. Robert Merritt was the sole employee of the secret Houston Plan. White House counsel John Dean took over administration of the Houston Plan after Tom Houston was eased out. Merritt recently recounted to me a key aspect of the plan that has never before been revealed. This was the existence of a secret court that convened in a secret location in Washington, before which Merritt appeared on at least 12 occasions in 1971 and 1972. Each time he submitted to a 3-judge panel there an affidavit sworn to him, but which was actually written by the FBI, that was sworn to him only 15 minutes before the court convened. Invariably, the court would issue a warrant for wiretapping or search or surveillance, or a combination of these aimed at a specific target. In at least 3 cases, the target was a law firm. The only law firm Merritt remembers today was Arnold and Porter, for which a wiretap warrant was issued. Another target was the Institute for Policy Studies. The secret court always convened at 1 a.m. and was located beneath an apartment building on P Street, Northwest, 3 blocks west of Rock Creek Park in Washington, D.C. Entrance was gained through the garage beneath the apartment building. Inconspicuously located there was a small elevator that held only 3 persons that descended 2 stories further down beneath the apartment building. The elevator opened onto a small corridor that led to a door that had 3 separate locks on it, each of which required a separate key. Once that door was opened, there were 2 other unlocked doors that ultimately led to a small courtroom. On each side of where the 3 judges sat were American flags. The judges wore black suits, not judicial gowns. "In God We Trust" appeared on the wall behind the judges. Merritt, following the orders of the FBI agents, recited to the judge the basic contents of the affidavit prepared by the FBI, of which he had no personal knowledge. He then submitted the affidavit to the judges, who read it and then handed it back to Merritt to sign. Lawyers from the U.S. Department of Justice were always present. The proceeding usually lasted 45 minutes, after which Merritt was escorted out by the FBI agents and subsequently driven back to his residence. When President Richard Nixon fired John Dean as the White House counsel in April 1973, Dean took the only copy of the 31-page Houston Plan with him and submitted it to Chief Judge John Sirica. To this day, the copy has remained among the federal court's sealed records beyond the reach of a subpoena. Its contents are unknown to the public. Merritt's work under the Houston Plan was exemplary to the words of President Nixon, which is why Nixon was to entrust him to carry out a clandestine mission dealing with one of the nation's most vital secrets, as herein described in Chapter 3.
Yes, and I'm going to point out right here, but we'll come back to this later on, that about 2 months ago, Robert Merritt was subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury in Washington, D.C. He has refused to tell me what why he was summoned there and what he testified to there. And I'm making an educated guess based on my own background and knowledge that it was about the work that you just read, about his work in swearing to these affidavits that were of the applications made to this 3-judge court. Now, this was before the creation of the FISA court. The FISA court and the FISA Act the FISA Act was enacted by Congress in 1978. It was enacted by Congress, and the court was created in light of the scandal of what we're talking about right here, what you just read, that was revealed in part not fully, but in part during the Watergate scandal. And so there was a predecessor to the present FISA court, and you've just described how it operated. And this was part of the whole Houston plan. The Houston plan was multifaceted, and part of it was a secret court that issued all these secret authorizations for wiretapping and surveillance and stealing the mail and so forth and so on. And since 1978, the FISA court, which is a legitimately created court, whose appointments are actually nominated by the president, but actually by the Chief Judge Roberts of the U.S. Supreme Court, have issued over 33 authorizations based on applications made to the court. Now, this would average about 2 a day since the court has been created. It's obvious if they have 2 a day made to the court, there's no way that they could have a hearing on each case. A hearing could take weeks or months. So they're acting upon the information that is presented to them by the NSA or by the National Security Agency or by the FBI, which is sworn to. And this gets back to what the president wants to declassify. And the intelligence community is very opposed to the declassification of these applications in the Carter Page case, because doing so would compromise our intelligence gathering, would reveal the methods and under which the United States does conduct intelligence operations, and probably name people who are working with us in foreign countries to assist the United States. It would seriously compromise the national security of the United States, and the intelligence community is up in arms that President Trump wants this done. And who would benefit from this? Well, one of the beneficiaries of this would be Russia, because any information that is released of the secret FISA applications and decisions by the FISA court, any information that would reveal the operations by the United States of intelligence operations would be gleaned by Russian intelligence and used against us. And so what President Trump is attempting to do would, at least in my opinion, seriously compromise the national security of the United States. But let's go ahead and go back to what Robert Merritt did when he was recruited to be a confidential informant and to carry out certain assignments under the Houston plan.
Well, you know what? Before we get to that, why don't we take a commercial break, okay? And then when we get back, we'll get into that whole stuff with the Merritt's activity under the Houston plan. But let me ask you a quick question. It's my understanding that Trump made this decision to declassify this FISA application on the advice of Sean Hannity, Jeanine Pirro, and I believe Greg Jarrett from Fox News. Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of that, but I don't rule that out.
Yeah, well, I believe he said this in an interview recently. And also, too, now President Trump doesn't know what's in. He's going to have it declassified, but he doesn't know what's in it.
Well, they must have an idea of what's in it, because they just specify the pages they want done by number.
Right, but it's the pages that have been redacted, because they already released a redacted version. So now he wants the 20 pages and have them unredacted. But no one knows what's in there. Certainly Hannity and Pirro and Garrett don't know what's in there. And even Garrett's book that just came out, where he predicted that all the stuff that was going to be in there wasn't in there. So
you're saying that may be a great surprise to Trump when this is if this ever becomes public, which is in the FISA application and in the decision by the FISA court?
It seems to me that these people are running around crying wolf, saying that, hey, as soon as we release this FISA warrant, soon as the second version, as soon as it's released, it's going to prove that we're right and everybody's been wrong all along. And they lied to the FISA judge, and it was all based on this phony dossier and all this stuff they keep repeating over and over. But they're just basically crying wolf. And when this is released, it's not going to prove any of that. I can't see how it possibly could. But on top of that, Trump doesn't know what's going to come out of there, and neither does Hannity or Pirro or Garrett. None of these people know. You know what I mean?
Well, the premise is that the application on Carter Page is based on the dossier prepared by the British intelligence agent,
Right.
and therefore that is a defective dossier, and therefore from the very beginning, starting with Carter Page, the whole Mueller investigation has been an illegal one, and they're expecting, and this has been put by someone on Facebook who claims he has personal knowledge that Chief Justice Roberts ultimately, just before the election, will rule that all these applications were illegal and were not properly authorized based on proper applications by the NSA or the FBI, and therefore the Mueller investigation is not a legal one. This is far-fetched, but in this day and age, you can't rule out anything, as we know with the big dispute undergoing right now on the nomination of Judge Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court.
Well, you're the attorney, so explain to me, what difference would it make? Okay, even if this search warrant application against Carter Page is the worst one that's ever been approved by any judge in the whole history of the world. Okay, let's give him that. What does that have to do with the rest of the Mueller investigation, with the Russians visiting Trump Tower and all this other stuff?
I know. All this is based on their premise.
Yeah.
The premise of the Trump people and the people you just enumerated who are pushing for this is that the very foundation is a false one, an illegal one, and everything that flows from it, the fruit of the poisonous tree, you might say, everything that flows from it is illegal and should be discarded. And it's going to create a great constitutional crisis. There's no doubt about it. But this is they're pinning much of their great hopes upon this happening, and they have other things that they have planned too. In other words, a lot is going to happen between this date, which is September 20th, 2018, and the November elections. And expect a lot of things on both sides, by both Mueller and by the White House.
This is an extremely interesting time in history. So let's take a little commercial break. We're with Douglas Caddy, who is an attorney, Watergate attorney, friends with E. Howard Hunt, had a desk right next to E. Howard Hunt, the historical figure here involved in Koreagate. The book is Being There, Eyewitness to History, and he's given us his expert analysis on this FISA warrant application. We'll be right back with more of Douglas Caddy after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Check out CartKing.com, 877-986-7771. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services, like let's say you own an office building or a warehouse. Put one of these carts there in the lobby. Well, CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail coffee and food carts and kiosks money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. From large, heated, and secure outdoor retail or food kiosks to smaller, more mobile coffee kiosks or coffee stations, coffee carts, CartKing.com designs and builds them all. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on the website, CartKing.com. Please visit today at CartKing.com or just call them at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you and you get a good deal. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites. And we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company They're located in India, so you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service. They offer all sorts of business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshoring, research network, customer care, press release, content writing and distribution, and much, much more. Now you can get a hold of Subhash Technosis by email at info@subhashtechnosis.com. Their website is www.subhashtechnosis.com, and their Skype is ANUSHASUBASH. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Douglas Caddy, attorney Douglas Caddy, and author of the book Being There, Eyewitness to History. Now, Mr. Caddy, you were telling us about that 2 months ago, Robert Merritt received a subpoena for the grand jury. Is this one of those grand juries that Mueller is convening or involving this business?
It's my understanding, yes, but that's about all of my knowledge of what happened in Washington before that grand jury.
And has he appeared before that grand jury?
Yes, he has. Mm-hmm.
But he hasn't told you what went on there?
No. He's under a gag order. He's under a gag order and he hasn't told me. And so what I'm talking about today is just an educated guess on my part.
Right.
Based on what is happening here with the application, with the request by President Trump earlier this week to declassify the FISA application dealing with Carter Page. Because this goes back to this will become a big controversy. It will emerge as a big controversy as the case unfolds, because they will go back to the very beginning, which was what was described by you from my preface, whereby in 1970, 1971, 72 there was a secret court that operated just 4 blocks from both where I lived and for where Robert Merritt lived. We lived across the street from each other on P Street, but we never met. And this was a secret court that operated for several years and made all these decisions underground at 1 a.m. in the morning, and but this was and so they're going to, in my opinion, in order to understand what is going on today with the FISA court, you have to go back to the very beginning. The very beginning is what you just described from my book, from the preface of my book, of that secret court. Now, Robert Merritt did become a confidential informant, and he did a number of activities, both for military intelligence, for the FBI, for the Washington, D.C. police, for any number of government agencies, and many of these were illegal. I mean, he talks about in Watergate Exposed, which was published in 2010 by Trine Day, about the break-ins that he engaged in, about the stealing of mail, about the distribution of poison candy that was given to anti-war demonstrators. He said probably led to the deaths of some of them, about how he cut the loudspeakers at these anti-war demonstrations in Washington, so the audience couldn't hear the speakers, about all sorts of activities, including he says he assassinated a lawyer walking down the street in Alexandria upon orders of Carl Schaffler because of the anti-war activities of this particular lawyer. And but it becomes very personal here, because I have to explain where I come into this picture, because I was the original attorney for the Watergate 7. I was awakened by a phone call on June 17th after midnight from Howard Hunt, who was calling me from his office in the White House. He said he had to come to where I live, which was on P Street in Washington, about a mile from the White House and a mile from Watergate. He said there was something very important. He had to talk to me, and he did come to my apartment and explained about the break-in that had just occurred a few hours earlier at Watergate. He retained me to represent him, and he called, and I spoke with Gordon Liddy, and Gordon Liddy retained me to represent him, and they both retained me to represent the 5 arrested individuals, being James McCord and the 4 Cuban Americans. And this was June 17th. On June 20th, Robert Merritt said he was visited by Carl Schaffler and by Carl Schaffler's partner in the Washington, D.C. police, and they asked him to assassinate me, to kill me. And he would be financially rewarded very, very much if he would agree to this. And he resisted doing so. Their great fear, as I understand it at that time, was that I was such a close friend of Howard Hunt and Dorothy Hunt, And they were my closest friends in Washington because I knew them, I knew them from, Howard Hunt was my first client in the law firm when I joined the law firm in 1970. I had met him, I had worked for General Foods Corporation, which had sent me to Washington to operate out of their public relations firm, which turned out, unbeknownst to me, to be a CIA front. And Howard Hunt had been assigned there by Richard Helms in 1970. And that's how I came to know Howard Hunt, because William F. Buckley was the godfather to his children, and I had founded the conservative movement with Tom Charles Houston and William F. Buckley in September of 1960. And so, but the great fear of the intelligence agencies and of Carl Schaffler was that Howard Hunt had told me things that he should not have told me, such as we now know, but it never came out in Watergate, that the burglars that went into Watergate were team number one in the Kennedy assassination. These were the team number one that came from Miami to Dallas. We're talking about Frank Sturgis and the other Cuban Americans, and we're talking about Howard Hunt being there and distributing money the night before for payment for their services. And as investigated as the Watergate case was, it was never disclosed until many years later that the burglars that went into Watergate were the team number one in Watergate in 1972, were team number one in 1963 in the assassination of Kennedy.
And Mr. Caddy, at the time of that assassination, the day of that assassination, you and Howard Hunt shared an office.
No.
You didn't share an office with him at that public relations firm for General Foods?
Yes, but not during the assassination. The assassination was 1963. I was in law school in New York City. I was working in Governor Rockefeller's personal office at 22 West 55th Street, and in law school from 1962 to 1966. I was not sent to Washington, D.C. by General Foods until 1969.
Okay. I made a mistake. I'm sorry.
But ultimately, yes, we did share an office because the Mullen Company, which was the public relations firm retained by General Foods Corporation, which was never disclosed to me, they had been incorporated by the CIA, and General Foods were working very closely with the CIA. Mm. The Mullen Company just had a small office of about 4 rooms inside the Kiplinger building in Washington, but on its letterhead, it had offices all around the world. Of course, these were offices that were being used for CIA activities. And we did share a room in that office there. Howard Hunt and I did. But when I left, I went with a law firm in late 1971. In 1971, and then later that year, Hunt joined the staff of the White House. Mm. And the Mullen Company was sold to Robert Bennett, who was a son of Senator Bennett of Utah, both of whom had close CIA connections. And Bennett moved the Mullen Company to another building closer to the White House. And I never shared any offices with Hunt at that time. So when Watergate broke, I was working for a law firm, separate and apart from my employment previously with General Foods. But the reason that Schaffler and his partner wanted me done in is, as I explained, they feared that Hunt had told me too many things, and that I would bring this out as part of the Watergate case. God forbid that the Kennedy assassination would emerge as a key element of the Watergate case. The Kennedy assassination in 1963 would emerge in Watergate in 1972. And don't forget, in the Oval Office tapes, Nixon talked about the Bay of Pigs, which Haldeman said was a phrase he used in order to talk about the Kennedy assassination. So it was a very, very sensitive matter. So Barrett refused on June 20th to do the assassination of me. But they came back with him. Schaffler and his partner from the police department came back with him on June 28th, 11 days after the break-in at Watergate, to renew the request. There were 5 individuals there, Schaffler and his partner, and 3 intelligence agencies from different agencies, that he undertake the assassination of me. They felt it was imperative that it be done. and they offered him a large sum of money if he would do it, but he still resisted doing it. But on that particular date, on June 28, 1972, 11 days after Watergate took place, I was served with a subpoena within the courthouse by one of the three prosecutors who were prosecuting the case, Donald Campbell, to appear forthwith before the federal grand jury. He physically grabbed me by the arm and pulled me into the grand jury room. And once this occurred, Schroeder said, at that point, he said, well, the grand jury will destroy Caddy. It may not be necessary that we do it physically. And so going ahead here, I was pulled before the grand jury, and I refused to answer 38 questions upon the advice of 5 attorneys, 3 of whom that had been retained to represent me by my law firm were former assistant U.S. attorneys themselves. They knew right from the Justice Department. They said I could not answer these 38 questions. But Judge Sirica on July 12th, this is less than a month after Watergate broke, in open court said, Mr. Caddy is, in my opinion, is a principal in the break-in, in the crime, and I'm ordering him to answer these questions. And if he does not, I'm going to hold him in contempt and incarcerate him. And so there was a hearing the next day, and I refused to answer those 38 questions because my attorney said I could not answer them because they would violate the attorney-client privilege and the right to counsel. And Judge Sirica did hold me in contempt of court and incarcerate me. And I was held for about 4 or 5 hours, and the Court of Appeals released me pending a hearing before the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit on my being held in contempt of court.
Well, let me ask you a question. At this time, you weren't practicing criminal law, were you?
No, our law firm was a labor law firm, and we had no experience in criminal law. But when Howard Hunt came to my apartment, I called the only partner of my law firm. I was just an associate. I was not a partner. The only one that was in town, Robert Scott, and explained to him over the phone. He knew Howard Hunt because he had worked with me on Howard Hunt's personal matters, such as drafting the will and letters to publishers and so forth. He knew Howard Hunt, and so he said, "Well, we're not a criminal law firm, but I will get you a criminal law lawyer to assist you in representing Howard Hunt and Gordon Liddy and these individuals." And he did. He got me Joseph Rafferty, and Joseph Rafferty and I appeared at the arraignment later that day on June 17th. So Joseph Rafferty was a criminal law attorney.
And then what was it that made the judge suspect that you were actually involved in the planning and the carrying out of the burglary?
There was no evidence of that. He just made that up. But as I'll explain why that came about in a moment here, because Judge Sirica was a very vicious and mean judge. He was also in many ways a corrupt judge, and I'll explain why. But on June 19th, the Court of Appeals issued an opinion that I had to answer the questions or be incarcerated again. And on July 19th, this is a month after the Watergate case broke. On July 19th, there was a discussion in the Oval Office tape you can read between President Nixon and Haldeman, where they discussed me and discussed what has happened to me. And Nixon is appalled as a lawyer. He said, "How can they do this to an attorney? How can they do this to the defense attorney?" And he was just appalled at the way the case was unfolding. But I did go back before the grand jury and answered all the questions posed to me by the prosecutors. But over the July 4th holiday, I've been approached to pass the hush money to the burglars. I did not know who this person who was calling me. It turned out later on to be Anthony Ulasewicz, who was acting upon orders of John Dean to pass and I was the first person they approached to pass the hush money. And I refused to do so. I had a partner in my law firm sitting in my office when I turned that request down from whoever the caller was. It turned out to be Ulasewicz. He gave me another name, obviously, at that time. And he just almost gasped out. He gasped out loud and almost lost control of himself when I turned down the request. I said to him, "I don't know who you are or what you're up to, but I don't want anything to do with you." And that all came out later on that I had turned down the hush money. But when I tried to bring this out on July 19th, when I was answering those 38 questions that the court had ordered me to answer, I was cut off. When I started describing my question, the phone calls I'd received to pass the hush money, I was cut off by Sir Seymour Glanzer, one of the three prosecutors. And so I could not testify before the grand jury. And those orders came down from John Dean to the head of the Henry Peterson, who was the Assistant Attorney General in the Justice Department for the Criminal Division, who passed the orders on to the prosecutors that I should only answer the 38 questions, don't let Caddy answer anything else. And so they didn't let me. This whole case could have been disclosed on July 19th, July 20th, right in that area there, had I been allowed to disclose that before the grand jury that had been approached for the hush money. But I was not allowed to. Now, why this is relevant here? Because when Robert Barrett refused to agree to engage in the assassination of me, Carl Schofter said to him, "Well, hold it a minute. I'm going to place a phone call." And he went to a payphone in the People's Drugstore there on DuPont Circle, and he called Judge Sirica. This was about July. This was after Judge Sirica had held me in contempt of court and incarcerated me, and so it was around July 15th or 16th, still a month after Watergate broke. And Judge Sirica said, "You come right to my office." And so Carl Schofter and Robert Merritt went to Judge Sirica's office. And Judge Sirica said to Robert Merritt, "This is a man you can trust," pointing to Carl Schofter. "Do whatever he orders you to do, and whatever he orders you to do, I can guarantee you will never be prosecuted by the government." Robert Merritt started to say, "What he's asked me to assassinate." He had actually asked Merritt to assassinate two people, myself and columnist Jack Anderson. But before he could get the full sentence out, Judge Sirica cut him off. And he said, "Do you understand what I'm saying to you? You just follow the orders of Carl Schofter. I respect him. He's a highly respected law enforcement officer, and I guarantee you will not be prosecuted." And on the way out, Carl Schofter said, "You should lock Caddy up again if you have to. Lock him up again," because at that point we're still waiting the decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals. But Judge Sirica did not reply. Robert Merritt said Judge Sirica did not reply to this request by Carl Schofter as to that I'd be locked up again if I refused to answer the questions before the grand jury. But I didn't answer the questions before the grand jury. But that goes to show how biased Judge Sirica was. And there's been a book written about how Judge Sirica engaged in activities behind closed doors with the prosecutors, with the special prosecutor. And when Woodward and Bernstein came to Houston in 2014, and I met with them and talked with them, they told me that Judge Sirica had sought them out and told them in the midst of Watergate, "Don't you let up on your stories in the Washington Post. You pursue this vigorously." Judge Sirica assigned to himself the grand jury investigation, which he conducted. Really, he was a judge, but he conducted as a prosecutor. He assigned himself the chief judge to the first Watergate trial and the cover-up trial. And then he wrote a book called To Set the Record Straight, which he never discussed any of this stuff. But he got paid $1 million by the publisher to write a book after Watergate case closed, $1 million, which today would be about $4 million, and never disclosed anything we've discussed here. Judge Sirica was a corrupt, venal judge. He never gave the defendants a fair trial. If you read Howard Hunt's memoirs, he writes about in his memoirs about watching me being falsely accused by Sirica, and that's when they realized that they weren't going to get a fair trial, and that's when they realized they better embark on a cover-up and get hush money to survive during the trial and after the trial. And this all occurred because of the activities of Judge Sirica and the Court of Appeals of what they did to me. And in the decision of the Court of Appeals on Liddy's appeal, they acknowledged that I had a right to raise these questions, a legitimate right to raise the questions about the attorney-client privilege and the Sixth Amendment right to counsel. But they said in the whole scheme of things, this was not important because Liddy was overwhelmingly guilty. Of course, he was overwhelmingly guilty because of the activities of the court in not allowing him a fair trial. And Judge Sirica and the Court of Appeals not allowing a fair trial in what they had done to me as the defense attorney. And so I'm just bringing this up now, but let's go forward even more with Robert Merritt's involvement with Richard Nixon. In 1972, Robert Merritt was awakened. This was a few days before J. Edgar Hoover died on May 2nd, 1972. Robert Merritt lived on P Street, and he was awakened by a knock on his door at 2 a.m. in the morning. It was a Secret Service agent there. He said, "The President of the United States wants to see you immediately." So he hurriedly dressed, and he was driven to the White House, and he was taken 300 feet underneath the White House, where there was a series of corridors and meeting rooms and transportation that would escort people away from the Capitol in a very fast manner if there was an emergency and so forth. And Nixon was awaiting him, and Nixon greeted him as at the door there, at a room where Nixon had his office, 300 feet beneath the White House. And he said to Merritt, "You were selected by me personally to be the sole employee of the Houston plan, and I must compliment you on the work that you did. You were more effective than an FBI agent. You were given an assignment, and you did the assignment, but you did it your way, and you were more effective." And so they had a report there. Nixon said, so the meeting ended that way, and Nixon said, "You will hear from me again." Well, the next meeting took place about 5 days before Watergate, the arrest at Watergate, which was about 10 days later, okay? And Nixon was summoned him again for a meeting which was held about 3 a.m. Deep beneath the White House there. And at this point, Nixon said to him, "Well, I have assignments for you." Among the assignments he had for Merritt was to assassinate a professor at American University, an anti-war professor who was causing quite a consternation within the White House. Remember, the Houston plan was still in full operation at that point. And also he gave Merritt instructions of how to disrupt the activities of anti-war organizations centered around DuPont Circle. And but at that point, Merritt had through his own informant had learned of the planned break-in at Watergate. He learned of it 2 weeks before the break-in occurred on June 17, 1972. He learned it from a telephone operator, a friend of his, who was in Columbia Plaza Hotel where the prostitution ring took place. Remember, the burglars went in there to get records on the prostitution ring, among other things, being operated out of the DNC. And so he told President Nixon, "Do you understand that Carl Schofter already knows of the plan to go into the Democratic National Committee?" And Nixon said, "Well, I'm not concerned about that. That has nothing to do with the White House. I have a bit of knowledge about what's going to take place, but I'm just going to sit back and watch what unfolds." Mm. And Merritt argued with him and said, "You must understand it." And Nixon said, "Mr. Merritt, do you understand? I'm the president. You're not the president. I'm the president." And Nixon took personal affront that Robert Merritt was arguing with him about the importance of having advanced knowledge of what would occur. And that's how that meeting ended. And the final meeting took place shortly about the time I was being held in contempt of court by Judge Sirica, okay? And that was when the third and final meeting between Merritt and President Nixon deep beneath the White House. And when Merritt arrived and went into the room, Nixon was crying. The tears were rolling down his face, and he pointed, and Merritt said to him, "Mr. President, what's happening?" And Nixon pointed to the Washington Post, an early edition of the Washington Post, which had a long article on the front page about the Watergate scandal. And he said, my presidency is finished. It's all over. I'm through as President of the United States. And though he did continue to fight, as we know, for 2 more years, he did not leave until August of 1974. But he realized at that point that it was just a matter of time before he'd have to leave the presidency. And so he gave Merritt a certain assignment. He read Merritt a letter that was addressed to Henry Kissinger, in which he talked about the alien presence on Earth. There is an alien presence on Earth. There was an alien being from another planet, a Nibiru, as I understand it, that was working with our scientists at Los Alamos. Nixon was very much aware of this. He knew he had been following all this when he was vice president under Eisenhower. He was very, very much familiar with the whole subject. And his letter to Kissinger included a code which unlocked all the knowledge that we had gained from this alien that was working with our scientists. And he asked Merritt to take this to Henry Kissinger and hand deliver it. He said he could no longer trust anybody in the White House. Why could he not trust anybody in the White House? This was about 2.5 weeks after Watergate broke, because there had been a military operation, intelligence operation undergoing in the White House. Remember, Yeoman Radford was delegated by the Pentagon, and he went into to be the liaison to the White House, and he copied 5,000 documents from Henry Kissinger's briefcase when he traveled with Kissinger on these foreign travels. Mm-hmm. He stole other documents from the National Security Council, and this became a big issue, a big controversy, and Jack Anderson broke it publicly that there was an illegal intelligence operation being run by the Pentagon, reporting directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff by Yeoman Radford. And Radford took this information to Jack Anderson because they were both Mormons. But there was also a CIA operation in the White House at the same time when in the months before Watergate took place, in the years before Watergate took place, and Howard Hunt was the chief person there, and he sent reports more than once a week, sometimes twice a week, to Richard Helms, at the director of the CIA, as to what was transpiring inside the White House. And so Nixon knew he could not trust anybody in the White House. He knew he could trust Robert Merritt, who had faithfully performed all those duties under the Houston Plan. And so he asked him to deliver this letter to Kissinger, and Nixon, he taped the letter to Merritt's chest using hospital tape, pulled the shirt down and said, "Don't let the Secret Service agent know anything about this envelope. You take it to Kissinger's residence. If you can't deliver it personally to Kissinger, you mail it. It's ready to be mailed. It's a business envelope. It will not be noticed in the mail. It will reach Kissinger." And that's ultimately what Merritt had to do, because he couldn't get it directly to Kissinger. But he did get a call from Nancy a week later saying they had received the letter, the vital letter from Nixon, which contained a letter, but it also contained 2 cassette tapes. Merritt does not know what was on the cassette tapes. But Nixon also said that he said there was a letter that I've hidden away in the library of the White House in Volume 2 of American History, in the binder of Volume 2 of American History in the White House, addressed to the American people. At a certain point in time, and he estimated it might be around this year, 2018, that letter may be discovered, and when it's discovered and read aloud, the American people will disclose all we know, at least all I know at this time in 1972, that Nixon knew about the alien presence and our interaction with the alien presence, whatever the alien presence is, whether it's from another dimension or from another planet or whatever it is, okay?
Well, let me ask you this, Doug, because you had given me, last time we talked, you gave me Robert Merritt's phone number. He's still willing to come on the show?
Yes, he is. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes. And now, the thing is, too, is we're pretty much out of time. I'd like to keep this to 1 hour, okay. So we're out of time. What do you want to leave us with?
Okay, I want to leave us wrapping this up. We're wrapping this up right now, okay? Yeah. We're wrapping this up because President Trump, earlier this week, in September of 2018, has requested that these FISA documents be declassified. This is the beginning of maybe declassification of a lot of FISA documents, not just the ones dealing with Carter Page. And we don't know where this is going, but if you read my book, Being There, my autobiography, Being There, I talk about the prelude to the FISA court, which is what Robert Merritt was involved in. I also talk about the 3 meetings with President Nixon that Robert Merritt had. And so the bottom line here is before the November election, I think this is going to become a very hot issue. And so I'm giving you, Ed, and your listeners a preview based on my experience and knowledge. Merritt has not told me what he testified to before that grand jury, so it's educated guess on my part. Advanced knowledge of what may turn out to be a major constitutional issue that may go to the Supreme Court to be decided.
Douglas Caddy, I can't thank you enough. Okay, I can't thank you enough. You're eyewitness to history. They should call you. Being there, eyewitness to history. Douglas Caddy. Keep me abreast of anything that's going on. Anything new come up, give me a call. Put you right back on here. Okay.
Will do. Thank you so much, Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Caddy. Okay, then we had Doug. Let me play a little quick commercial break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Check out CartKing.com, 877-986-7771. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services, like let's say you own an office building or a warehouse. Put one of these carts there in the lobby. Well, CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail coffee and food carts and kiosks money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any